Tyres.
Or something. It was a new car that was vastly expensive. I knew that it was twice the money of an Audi or whatever it was.
And there were these complete range of BMWs, all in sort of Schwartz grey or black.
But if you want real value, the kind of value that you boast about to your mate down the pub, it's electric cars. They just seem so cheap. Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Collecting Addicts podcast. We're going to get straight into this, an important issue, headrests. They used to matter so much. I'm not sure they matter so much now, but everyone that listens to this wanted their dad to have the car with rear headrests. Let's face it, it made all the difference. Chris Cooper, tell me why.
Well, not just rear headrests. I couldn't remember. And who remembers watching the Sweeney?
Oh, yes.
Thinking,
last week.
well, Dad's all right because the Sweeney don't have headrests in their cars either. And
do they, Chris? Do they not? I noticed
Sweeney,
that.
I think part of it was probably they removed the front headrests for cinematic purposes. But they had those Granadas, the Mark I Granada GXL. Even the GXL didn't have front headrests. And I remember with that sort of very small boy, why didn't I have a slightly tingly sensation in my trousers today? I've never felt that sensation before. When Dad brought home his first car with front head restraints. And they were restraints, not headrests. They were a safety device. In the days when people on the television spoke in that Chumley Warner accent from the Fast Show, and generally had the wit and intelligence of George from Blackadder, we had to explain to people that cars were actually quite dangerous. And when they stopped suddenly and you went woof or were hit up the chuff and your head went woof, then head restraint was very... So the first one I ever used, experienced, was in a Volvo 144 estate. The sort of slightly triangular tombstone-y one with the big 2 bars through it, thinking, that'll be nice and comfy. And I sort of threw my head back in my uncle's car thinking, Jesus Christ, that's painful. Because they weren't meant to be comfortable. They were meant to be a restraint. But then they became comfortable. And sort of you see the modern interpretation, those in a Range Rover, the ones with the little sort of very, very soft extra bit. Range Rovers, in fact, Rover did it on the SD1 3500, as it might have described. Had that little extra teddy bear trimmed little pad.
Oh, it was lovely.
With the 2 little button studs either side. And you could stud it on, so it would just push the headrest out. It was all nice and squidgy and comfy and lovely and everything. That's when they became headrest. And the Range Rover one of that was the one with the sort of like an airline seat, the sort of the padded seats. The most saddo story I have on headrest, though, is the first BMW I ever had. It was a company car when I was at EY, Ernst & Young. It's the only nice thing I can say about my time at EY. It's really boring. Hated it. But I had an E36 325 coupe.
Oh, lovely.
More exciting even than the fact that I'd specified those 16-inch wheels when everybody else in the office had 15-inch wheels. What did they know? I thought, and more exciting than specifying leather trim, which I didn't do, and I specified a sunroof rather than air conditioning, because air conditioning was horrendously expensive. I specified rear headrests. How cool did my 325 look?
How much did it compromise your rear vision?
Quite a bit, but that didn't matter. It was just, I felt so. I would often park it. If I was at a work, I'd park it back in. So the first thing people saw through the rear was, he's got rear headrests. I didn't know you could have rear headrests in 325. I've never been happier.
Management material.
You need to explain to me this rear headrest. My dad's got rear headrests thing, because I'm obviously too young for that.
I think you are. You might have also been exposed to really nice motor cars from the start without wanting to say anything. But
always had rear headrests.
I know, but I can remember, this is shameful, as a young boy, already knowing a lot about cars, my father, who had been an absolutely devout BMW owner, from a garage in Bristol that might have had the surname Lovett. Actually, no, it was Western Counties then, so this is going back a long time.
Yeah.
And
Top of Westbury on Prom Trim.
yeah. And no, this is down on Zetland Road, mate. This is right down in the old days. And
sorry, that was the yeah.
And I remember my father chopping in a superior BMW to buy his first Audi. I think he went in there and didn't like the deal he was offered. So this is catastrophic. So he's gone from the Doyen driver's machine, the 323i, and he bought a 320i E30, didn't like it, and he went to White Tree Garage in Bristol and he bought an Audi 90, which, you know, is a glorified VW. It's got a longitudinal 5-cylinder engine that's about 3 feet in front of the front axle line, but it had rear headrests.
Yeah.
90
Quattro was cool.
He came home and his old BMW didn't have them, and this had them. It had a central armrest and rear headrests. And frankly, the world could just go shit itself.
It could.
I thought we were the coolest family ever. We'd arrived. We had a central armrest and rear headrests, and the world had changed.
I'd forgot the central armrest.
Why did I feel that way?
Yeah.
I mean, you're nodding. I mean, Neil is just about nodding. Manish looks utterly perplexed. And Edward's looking at me like I'm speaking a different language.
Yeah, this game isn't for Edward. It doesn't apply to him.
No, it should apply to everyone. Because Edward loves
special.
a rear cabin. Edward loves sitting in the back of a 911. So surely he can understand the... Neil Clifford, please help me here with rear headrests.
Well, I think it's maybe an age thing. If you're knocking on 50, then the most sophisticated thing in your teenage years was the rear head restraint.
Yeah, totally.
Basically,
Really?
it is, and maybe I think Chris, you touched on it. Even slightly more niche and sophisticated was the air conditioning button, because it was so expensive. It was like $2,000 on an E30, and I remember. I was lucky enough. I'd wangled a really good job by the time I was 24 and had a company car, the Renault 5 Raider that I talked about. And me and my mate Paul used to commute. I was in Portsmouth, he was in Winchester, and we'd take turns to drive into Oxford Street and park under our head office. I'd leave Portsmouth at 5 a.m, picking up at Winchester at 5:30. We'd be up the M3. There was no traffic in those days at 6 o'clock on the M3. And we were right over the Hammersmith flyover at 6:30, bang into the little secret underground car park. We'd wangled away because we didn't have a parking space. We were grade 5. Only grade 3 and above had a parking space.
Yeah.
But every single
Shame
morning,
of it.
we took a risk that one of the directors was on holiday or off sick or visiting shops, and we'd nick someone else's parking space every single day. And we'd bung a tenner to the security guard to let us go down in the lift. And the most sophisticated thing, when you'd go down in that lift and it was all dark, and then the lights, the movement sensor would come on, and there were these complete range of BMWs, all in sort of Schwartz grey or black, whatever it is, 535s, 530s, all E34. Zinnebar. Yeah, there's a bit of red. Zinnebar's red, wasn't it? Oh no, that's
red. Yeah.
Yep.
And Paul was in his 205, or I was in my Renault 5 Raider. It's a few E30s, 325s, all of them with rear head restraints. And in 1987, 1986, that was the most sophisticated thing I'd ever seen. I'm like, I just want to be that fucking guy with those rear head restraints. Yep. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to stay in the office till 8 o'clock at night, even though 2 hours of it was spent throwing Tipex around or doing stupid things or whatever. Smoking in the office. I didn't smoke, but everyone smoked in the office. No emails, so you could fill in your little form to ask someone something, put it in the internal mail. It'd take 2 weeks to get back. It was brilliant. But
Neil, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you one question? Can I ask you one question? So, at that point in your life, if you graduated to grade 4 or 3, would you have taken a 318i with rear headrests, sports front seats and alloy wheels, or a 320i on Steelies with no rear headrests and nothing inside it?
I'll tell you exactly the decision, because I did get promoted to grade 4. And my mate Paul, who was a grade 4 actually, so he went 318 IS in Arctic white with rear head restraints, cloth, no AC. which got nicked actually with 1,000 miles at that BP services at the Hammersmith flyover. I think
I
we've
know
talked
the
about
one.
that before.
Yeah.
We left the keys in there. We used to go in and nick donuts, and because that was the beginning of the Dunkin' Donut thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was suddenly you could buy these American donuts. So we'd eat a couple whilst we were queuing up to pay for the petrol, and then someone nicked the car because the keys were in it. But I decided,
Captain of industry here.
yeah, exactly. I decided to go Corrado G60.
Oh,
Because I wanted, for me, the fact that this car had a supercharger.
yeah.
I went off piste from BMW, and
Lovely shape.
I didn't regret it. I sort of, it was a big decision that, and you could pay extra. I could have even gone to grade 3, and you could have got a 325. Those wonderful. We should talk about company car schemes.
Oh,
Maybe we've done it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Where you can pay more, but I was.
Yeah, I did that for my head restraints. They were £18 a month or something ridiculous. Or
I was so skint that I couldn't afford the extra 200 quid to go to 325. So grade 4 gave me G60 cloth. I could have gone 16 valve AC leather, but I went 60
wrong
cloth,
choice.
sunroof, no AC. And actually, I think the G60 almost had tiny little rear head restraints.
you're right. It's a very good example of a car that slightly cheated because it had an integral extra bolster at the top.
Exactly. It had that tombstoney sort of slightly
suggestion of a headrest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So I think in my head, I'd convince myself that I did have rear headrest, even though I.
Yeah. No, that passed it. You're right. That passed the test. That rear view.
I need to very quickly pass this over to Edward Lovett, who has never looked more perplexed than he does now.
Funny enough, so I started working at BMW Bristol as my first job. So I started off by washing all of these cars with rear headrests. Although at the time I was not fascinated by the rear headrests. But when I eventually got into the sales department about a year later, I clearly was at the tail end of this. And Neil talking then about a 318 IS. That was a cool car. Would you take the 6-cylinder or would you take the 4-cylinder IS with an M Sport body kit in Avis blue? That was a brilliant car. Yeah,
you could convince yourself it was an M3.
Let me throw another curveball at you. How about this? This totally confused me as a kid. So I got a lift, I think, into school once in a parents who had a new Mercedes E-Class, the W124.
Yeah,
which would have been 88 or something. It was a new car that was vastly expensive. I knew that it was twice the money of an Audi or whatever it was. Anyhow, it had rear headrests. Not much else. I don't think you had any floor mats or radio, but it had rear headrests, status symbol. But it had a button.
Yes.
You could put them down.
Yeah.
Like, if you've got them, they need to be on display. Why would you want to get rid of them?
For reversing. Reversing.
But then you had to put them back up manually.
That was the flaw. That was the flaw. I always wondered, because you think, I'm not going to put them down for reversing, because when you drive off again, they're not on show. They don't pop back up. I'd have to stop and get out. I'm just going to learn to reverse better. Mercedes, you've dropped one there. No, totally. I'd never got that.
Manish, your thoughts on headrests? Because you look slightly less perplexed than Edward, but you still look like you're dealing with a room full of absolute idiots.
No, I mean, not at all. What I remembered was, talked about him before. My friend Max's father was he was an architect and really into his Citroens in the 70s and 80s. And I remember the front headrests in his Citroen CX. And if you remember sort of the late 70s, early 80s CXs, they had that kind of almost galaxy bar center to the seat, sort of almost chocolate blocks. And the headrests came with 3 poppers.
Yes.
There were 3 poppers. You basically, you had 1 inch of adjustment, basically, because 2 of the poppers had to be in. You couldn't adjust it to the very top setting with just 1 popper, because it would fall off. You couldn't do it at the bottom, but basically you had about 1 inch of give, and they were just so sexy. And it just got me trawling a little bit. And I didn't know. I'll send these to Rowan. But there's a CX GTI. It says, avec siège cuir en option. So with leather options. But look at this. I mean, these are these headrests.
Wow.
Oh, they're
Or
great.
Mange two,
that's had a
Rodney.
Blake
Mange
7,
two.
isn't it?
They
Beautiful.
scissor doors. What car's that?
Citroen CX.
It's a cutaway.
That's
Yeah.
a cutaway, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, the cutaway. You can have a little look at the leather option.
Yeah.
And then at the final, and look at the SM. I mean, look at this. This is sort of, I think this is sort of almost Maserati Bora-esque. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That is quite nice. Yeah.
I
You
think
were
it's
very
great.
cool, you were very cool ordering a Citroen in the 70s. I didn't know anyone cool enough to order a Citroen. In the
Oh God, they were obsessed with Citroens. They had Citroens and they had a Rolls Royce Silver Shadow too. That it was, you know, where I think he paid a very good amount of money for it, wasn't he? But it was, I think I mentioned it. It was fantastic. We'd go out to nightclubs and occasionally Uncle Francis would pick us up in this car, and you'd be a bit drunk and very sweaty and sitting in the back of a. Do you know what that is? Can you guys remember what that is?
Well, it's
Ford
like
of some
a
sort.
Ford
Alpha.
of some sort.
or RS2000.
It is. It's the Escort Mark II from 1976, the RS2000.
Yeah.
And look at the headrest. It's got sort of
The tennis
it's got
racket.
netting in it.
Tennis racket ones, yeah.
Well, they were for a long time netted headrests on a Recaro.
Yeah.
Towards the
Professionals. The
Yeah.
professionals
Still is the product.
professionalized those headrests.
And
Yeah.
which car rebooted that 15 years later?
Ooh.
Oh, you have to tell us, Christopher.
The Colin McRae edition Impreza by ProDrive.
No.
Oh, yes.
They inserted a different Recaro seat that had the mesh headrest in it.
Yeah.
When we saw them, we were like, we got to have those. They were stunning.
Because
They
I
work.
think the Strada 130 twin cam had them.
Did it?
Yeah, on
There you
a
go. Call it 10 years then, Neil.
85. Yeah. No, I think the headrest was the 80s. It was peak 80s rear head restraint.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my 36 was mid 90s, and I felt cool as frog fur, as our American cousins would
So
say.
let me
Not
pose another.
that cool though, because you didn't have aircon, so you're a bit
Yeah.
hot.
Yeah, but I didn't grow up. My childhood and growing up had Fords and just knackered cars in it.
Sunroof.
Yeah, I came
Let
out of
me
the
pose.
wrong.
Let me pose another question. I think that something sinister happened in the early 90s because I think the introduction of the integral head-rested seat slightly ruined the shape of seats. And I'll give you an
Yes.
example, a car that myself and Neil have particularly climbed into over the years, maybe unfairly. When the Sport Evolution M3 came out, it had this winged seat with an integrated headrest with two holes for a harness.
Yeah.
At the time, I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
I
Yeah.
did.
But in hindsight, the Evo that had the classic BMW bolstered seat with a normal headrest
The Recaro.
is so much cooler, and it
Yeah,
also
and
wore
nicer.
properly. All those Sport Evo seats just fell apart.
Yeah.
They were quite good looking seats, and they had the
They
little
were.
3 M stripes. Yeah.
But seats like that, we our little jaunt to Castle Combe recently, when some of us had very lucky to be driving Porsche GT cars. Put a lid on, and the thing is so upright, and that sort of tombstone thing is that you pushed Porsche. Come on, these are first world problems.
They are first world problems.
Well, I think we're slightly split there. I just think headrests are incredibly important. I think
Yeah,
Neil
so do
agrees
I.
with me. Chris
They
agrees
define-
with me. Manish can understand the aesthetic, and Edward quite clearly thinks we're all mad, which is
No, well, the thing is, obviously, you've gone because of an era to the rear headrests. And when I was doing my little bit of research and started hunting for headrests, I was finding things like air scarves in Mercedes SLs and things.
That's good.
life changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Edward, sometimes
I've never had a
they
car
do
with
set. Sorry, I was just saying. Sometimes they do set Edward up as. I don't know if you've seen this fantastic film from the late 60s, early 70s, The Go-Between, about
Yes.
little boy goes to Norfolk with his and
Yes.
he stays with his aristocratic friend, and his shirt drops on the floor, and he goes and picks up his shirt in the bedroom. His aristocratic friend, which could be Edward Taylor, said, "What are you doing? That's for the servants."
Yeah,
Just such a great.
Well, Edward, I'm certainly not saying that you said that, but I don't want to punch in the face.
When I've also said, like, when I remember as a car salesman, dealing with some of the corporate buyers, and they were saying to me, right, I've got my list, and I'm just going to decide what I want. And, you know, I was working at a BMW dealership. At the end of the day, you used to fight with the car salesman. It was, you know, people used to go and start putting the car keys in their pocket at about 4:57 in the evening to make sure they got the 318 IS or the M3 that night. And, you know, we ultimately had a lineup of all the cars that anyone would ever want. And, you know, it's the perk of the job at the end of the day. And it changed a bit. And, you know, I'm not sure if I've said this, but I crashed a couple of cars. So,
No.
so I lost that perk.
Let me pose one thing for you now. This is a TV show that I really enjoyed. It was on Apple TV called Bad Sisters. Who's watched that?
Is it a movie?
Female Irish comedian, and it's about three sisters that decide that one of them is married to an abusive man, and they decide to take him out. And it's a really, really good show. I forgot the name of the actress who's very famous in it, but it's clever and it's funny. But it contains within it the worst piece of headrest continuity I've ever seen on film. It's worth watching for this. So
I hate that.
The lead drives an Audi convertible, but to make sure that they could get the right shots and access to the cabin, much like the Sweeney, sometimes they would remove the front headrest to get the shot, and sometimes they'd be back in. They also did a massive tracking shot where it was clearly on a trailer, where the steering wheel was not straight. So the driver did, I reckon, a 3-mile corner. And I don't think one exists in Ireland. Bad Sisters is a great show, but if you're like me, a total nerd, it's worth getting into the Audi convertible and trying to understand what was going on with the headrest game.
Yeah.
Right, we'll end that there before you all think I'm completely weird.
No, it's good. Good chat.
Next thorny issue. If you live in Germany, around about now, you have to, by law, change your vehicle's summer tyres onto winter tyres. In many ways, this is both safe, clever, and the right thing to do. However, it's a right pain in the arse, and I wonder whether a country as ill-disciplined as ours can actually do that without causing major issues. But winter tyres have been around for a long time. Some people use them all year round. What do we think about winter tyres? No, Clifford.
Well, I'd like to talk about tyres because it's clearly one of my immense frustrations and my inability to have any sort of understanding or connection really to how a car drives. I can never tell the difference between a shit tyre and a new tyre, a winter tyre and a summer tyre. You know, when everyone's raving about, oh, you've got to get the new 4S Sport Specials for your Carrera GT because otherwise you're going to die if you've got the old tyres, or, oh my God, get your winter tyres because once it goes down 2 degrees, the handling is so much. But I cannot tell the fucking difference ever with any tyre, no matter winter, summer, shit, good, Chinese, Pirelli. I can't tell the difference. No,
if you go and get into a Carrera GT on its original tyres on a cold day, you'll notice the difference.
I've done that.
Yeah,
I've owned one. I hated it.
But I'm talking.
Why did you hate it?
Someone that's never changed the tyres. So some tyres that almost.
Them. Of course, all my very clever car friends were like, oh, the first thing you need to do is change the new tyres because otherwise you're going to die within 5 minutes of going around the first roundabout. So, of course, that's what I did. And I had no understanding of what the difference was at all.
There might be.
Do you think it's all bobbins?
I think it's all bollocks.
There's a lot of bobbins in it. I think that sort of bobbins bit is also... You used to see it on piston heads a few years ago with people talking about, oh, have you taken your Porsche to center of gravity or center of the universe or Geoman Mach 3 or whatever it was? And you would said, no, I'm sure I should care about this a bit more than I do, but I'm struggling.
You know, I read those auto car, or was it Evo?
Tire of the year.
Tire of the year.
That's,
the 19 pages of...
That's a hard read.
Special beardy men writing about, well, the understeer on the 4S is so much better than the 3S. maybe it's my shit ability to have any connection with a car, really. I just get excited about head restraints. I don't really care about how they drive, maybe. I can't.
They do. I mean, the winter tire thing, I mean, technically speaking, they're cold weather tires. Because winter isn't really an engineering term. And Neil, you and I are old enough to remember when the cars that our fathers drove and we drove when we were younger, the tires would last about 10,000 miles a year, 10,000 miles, and they don't like, tires last 20, 30,000 miles now because they're not really rubber anymore. So when cold weather tires have got more rubber in, they're squidgier and they don't get hard below 7, 8 degrees centigrade. So there is, and the thing about them, and we live on a, Mark, you know where we are. Neil, you know where we are. There's a long hill up to our house where the farm is. If it's frosty or snowy, you can't really get up it in a two-wheel drive vehicle. With cold weather tires, with crucially these sipes, these little slits, if you look at the surface of them, people will know this, see lots of little extra sort of slices. They don't look knobbly. They haven't got studs in them. But as the tire rolls, and the rubber squidges, which is warmer, and therefore it grips onto things more, a little bit of gritty stuff in the road surface. Those sipes make little edges, and those edges, because there's multiple numbers of them, grip the road surface a bit more. Stop me if I'm getting boring. And that's what gives you traction or braking. The problem is you can get, like me, carried away because you think, hey, brilliant, like the enthusiastic Yorkshireman on the Fast Show. Yeah, it's tires, they're brilliant. And you career down this hill at normal road speed saying probably words like, watch this. And you career down the hill thinking, these cold weather tires will get me out of anything. And unfortunately, they don't. It's also another reason to get frustrated with Audi. I'm glad I've had this opportunity because about 10 years or so ago, when the Q7 became omnipresent in fashionable and less fashionable ski resorts in Europe, you could tell certain kinds of families and customers had all piled into these Q7s because the salesman had said to them, oh, if you're going skiing, Audi is the target car for skiists. You should have one of the Q7. And you find them all collected in an untidy pile at the bottom edge of the car park because all sit down there because their P0 Fandango summer tires had absolutely stuff all grip. Whereas we all cruised along with our winter tires, which we had at the time, and sort of crawled up and crawled down. And you say, but the salesman said it was four-wheel drive. And you thought, that's the problem with Audi. So I think, so your question was, are they good? I think they are good. The problem is for the UK, I mean, we've always had them, apart from the last few years, because the days when you really, really need them are fewer and far between.
Yeah, they are in the south of England. They certainly are.
Yeah, where they are amazingly good because they've got more things in them. On wet days on the motorway, bloody hell, they make a difference.
They do.
They just,
I really can't tell.
Can I just chime in on that exact last note? So I have zero experience of this, okay? I've never changed the tyres on my Audi A4 Avant from summer
Do you know the brand of tyres on your Audi, Manish?
I do. I've got Michelins on them. I do, yes,
Wow.
yeah. Little guy. Anyway, so what I did was I decided to see how cold it was, but not in London. And I found all the Sheffield weather from 1955 onwards. Okay, every month in Sheffield from 1955 onwards, and then it's broken into sort of spring, summer, and winter. And here are the high points. From 1955, basically the winter temperature up in Sheffield was mostly between 2 and 3 degrees centigrade. In 1963, you know, that awful winter, it was 0. 1975, Sheffield had an average winter temperature of 5.7 degrees. In 1998, they had a new high in the winter of 6.5 degrees, and the average high is between 3 and 5. So in other words, I think global warming probably is a phenomenon. And if you just look at Sheffield's temperatures, if you've got average temperatures in the winter of 6-7 degrees centigrade, why do you need cold weather tires?
The thing is, they're all sold out. If you go, I'm very obedient. I'm very compliant. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to get my wife's Golf onto winter tyres and my daughter's Beetle. I live in the countryside too, up in the Chilterns. I tried to. You can't buy them.
Yeah, last few years have been harder.
It's been yeah, they don't have enough supply in Europe. What mainly happens, certainly I know the Porsche dealers have to do this, but you bring your 911 in or your Cayenne or your Macan, and they take your wheels off, swap them up, and they store your summers or the winters on the roof.
Hotel.
And it's part of life. I think, Neil, when you're talking about the motorway, if you're driving in the winter out towards the Alps and you're on summer tyres and it's either pissing down with rain or there's a bit of sleet or your thermometer in the car beeps at you because it just drops below 3 degrees. And then you start driving about 60 miles an hour or a bit less because you're feeling a little nervous with kids in the car. And then someone comes past you and RS6 Avant at about 250 kilometers an hour, he's on winter tires. It's the same. I appreciate what you're saying, Neil, but it's like being in a racing car but on the wrong tires, and the confidence you feel when you're on the right tires is something you can't describe until you feel it yourself. And I don't have you really see a European driving on winter tires and versus a Brit in Europe on summer tyres. That's where you see the massive difference in the confidence in the car underneath you.
I'm sure.
There's a weird cut-off as well, I've found. So a lot of the faster car makers over the last 10 years, their press fleets, they won't lend them out after about November the 1st unless you've got winter tyres on them. So a Ferrari or a Porsche or a Lamborghini or something. And sadly, a fast car just doesn't work on them at all.
No.
They really, that squishy tread blocky thing becomes a massive pain. It almost feels like the car's on jelly. You can't get any connection with it at all. If you drive them quick, they're all over the place. And actually it makes you realise that you'd rather just park it up if the weather's that bad. But there's below that, I think they're quite special things actually in the winter. The idea of having a sort of a 2-litre TDI Golf estate on winters, that's a bit of a weapon in the right weather. You take care of
anything.
A sports car on a windy road if you had the right tyres. And I get Neil's point that the tyres is all bollocks, but I do believe that they're quite important. They're the only contact you have between your vehicle and the road. And I have to say that some of my cars are incredibly tyre sensitive. I like to keep things long enough that I try every sort of different brand of tyre, and they massively alter how I interact with the car. It sounds so nerdy, but a good set of tyres completes a car. The wrong tyre wrecks it for me.
Yeah. No, I just wish I had that subtlety of feeling for a car. I don't really. I can't tell the difference.
Well, we're going to work on that.
We are definitely going to work on that.
Well, Chris, just remind me, and to be honest with you, I didn't even look at the car before I sold it, but the 992 GT3 Touring is a car that's good or bad based on the tyres, because whatever I had on mine.
Yeah. I had the same as you. I had the Goodyears.
The Goodyear F1s.
And I was pretty much going backwards down the M5 ones in heavy rain. I couldn't believe how poor they were.
Yeah.
That was enough for me.
We've got a family home in France, and it's at the top of a hill, but in town. And obviously, up in the mountains, they're very good about clearing the road. But when the snow starts falling heavily in the evening, and you see how different people try and tackle this hill, it's so funny. And the best cars, clearly, the original Fiat 4x4 Panda. Yeah, that's the best car up there. But also seeing someone who knows how to handle a front wheel drive car in the snow is quite impressive. They on summer tires, they weave them up the road.
Yeah,
it's quite cool to see.
Technique. You
can get these big Range Rover Sports on summer tires that can't get up the road.
Can I ask a question about cold weather tires in Europe? If people, you had the example of Germany, that in Germany, it's a clock. They tell them when to change, and they change it by law. Do they change the tires on your car, or do they change the wheels? And if
the whole
they change
combo. they have tyre hotels. So you have two sets of wheels,
Ah,
two sets
okay.
of tyres, and garages or dealers will run what they call tyre hotels.
So do we have the equivalent in England?
No.
People have tried it, but it's just the demand is just. I mean, no, it's not a bit.
And we don't really have the space. So if everyone, because Ferrari did something a few years ago, Neil, didn't they, where they were encouraging, they were offering deals to all their customers to swap onto winter tyres.
Yeah.
But they needed you to take the wheels and tyres home. So it was just a total faff.
Well, that's what I was going to say. In London, it's the home of on-street parking.
Yeah.
We can't charge our cars in London.
Yeah.
So forget about, switch your tyres to something, I don't know, where we'd store them.
Good on Matthew. Matthew looked after me. We put the FF onto winters.
Yeah.
And because I couldn't tell the difference, I just left them on. So he still got my summers from about 3 years ago.
That's quite a common outcome, actually. Lots of people I know put winters on a car and say, stuff it, it's the family car, we'll leave them on all year round.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing to do.
No, but does that reduce your fuel consumption or something in the summer?
No, it probably increases it.
Tires.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It might have an effect, but I think they used to be a bit noisier, but they're not now.
Yeah,
do they wear faster? I mean, there must be some you pay for that, no?
Be slightly squidgier because
they are
noisier and squidgier. And I remember that E63 wagon I had about 10 years ago. I put winters on that, and on an occasional slightly warmer winter day, just squirting it onto a motorway around a sort of a long, you think, oh my goodness, I've got jelly, not tires.
Yeah, they move around, don't they?
Yeah, they do a lot, big time. Yeah.
Winter tyres. Go and investigate them for yourselves. They can be really good.
Yeah.
Or you can be like Neil and say they're a load of shite. Here we go. Our car week. What have you done in cars this week? Edward Lovett.
Well, I've been in a half term in New York. So I have returned back and made sure I've started up all my cars and driven them 3 minutes to work. So I've used those. But what New York's great. The weather was amazing. So we did an awful lot of walking, about 20,000 steps a day. But if you want to go from uptown to downtown or midtown to downtown, you really need to hop in an Uber or a taxi. Uber is a very, very expensive method of transport nowadays, isn't it?
True. $50 New York. Uptown to downtown.
Yeah. Like and
$50.
It is honestly, you can't. It's hard to go anywhere for less than $30 in an Uber. But you just got to jump in a yellow cab. It's half the price. To be honest with you, I'm going to start using black cabs in London just to compare to Uber, because it's extortionately expensive. Uber have gone from cash burn to this is the real cost of how much a taxi is. 150 quid to get to Heathrow.
Yeah.
I'm going to bore you with
that's my week.
So we came out from Hong Kong and I struggled for a couple of days with jet lag and feeling like, you know what? And then I went to collect a member of my family's Golf GTI. It's a Mark 7. I put a photo of it on Instagram, actually. And it's done 106,000 miles. And I can't stop driving it. I shouldn't be in it, really. But it's one of those cars that I just can't believe how brilliant it is. I just love it. It's dark blue. No one really looks at it. You park it on the street. It's just innocuous, but you can park it anywhere. It is the classless car. It's fast. It's competent. Everything works. I just can't believe how brilliant a car the Mark 7 Golf GTI is. To the point where I'm trying to find another car. I was going to buy an Alfa Giulia or something. I can't justify buying one of those. If I could buy a Golf like that, I cannot justify buying anything unless it's like an M5 or a really special car. The Golf has all bases covered. And furthermore, I'm not lying, it's really good fun to drive.
Yeah.
I just sound like a scratch record, but what a car.
Is it tartan seats?
Yeah, tartan seats, manual gearbox.
Perfect. Yeah,
perfect.
It's the iPhone, the original iPhone.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant car.
Yeah.
Manish, what have you done in cars this week? Have you actually driven a car this week?
No, I haven't, and I've just had that bloody index finger over the buy button. I've shared the configurator with you. And now I feel, especially since Chris sent me that photo of the convertible Mercedes.
S560.
The S560 in black and black. And that's £1,000 less than a BMW Touring. Because Neil has spotted the issue with us, I think, really perfectly. If I buy another estate, no matter how funky it is, to replace the estate that's sitting out there, that's actually just not going to change my life, a BMW 5.2i Touring is not going to make me want to jump.
Well, it will change your life because you'll be £56,000.
Yes. £57,000 when you were
for a 520 wagon.
I've got to get. I really want this.
That's about the same price as a 456 manual.
Yes. Yeah. There's a non-amp manual that Radley have, which is 59,950.
Yeah,
and it's been absolutely looked at. The thing is, like, because bloody Harris now.
I know.
He did the thing that Ra does, and those Disney. He's completely convinced and hypnotized me.
Can we also acknowledge, though, that within this general sort of astonishment at the cost of new cars, it does play massively into the hands of man maths, because now you can say if a new car BMW is £56,000 for a normal estate car, that opens up a whole world of used cars.
That's what I did.
Justify.
Yeah, you did.
You think,
Manish, this is our we use Slack and all our inquiries come through here. So at 1:37 yesterday, Ferrari 456 1996 manual with luggage, just MOT'd. That was consigned yesterday. So get ready, just start massage.
It's not a drill. It's not a drill, Manish.
Correct. Neil will teach you how to win an auction.
Yeah,
just get that finger going. Get that finger going.
What's unbelievable is how useless people are at it.
Yeah.
What is the key? What is the key to
win? More than everyone else.
Play to win.
How do you do it?
It's very simple. Play to win.
We can teach you. Chris Cooper, what have you done in your cars this week?
So so this weekend I drove to Cornwall and back and via somewhere else. So I drove more miles this weekend, Manish. I think you drove last year.
Definitely.
About 700 and something miles. So I looked at another SL. So I'm now being besieged by all the salesmen selling classic Range Rovers and SLs and M635s that I've seen in the last week since I last talked about what I've done at the weekend. So apart from putting my fingers in my ears, going la 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 la, thinking I've got to disappoint at least one of them. Because it's now autumn and we live on a farm, so there's lots of trees. I spent most of the weekend on my beautiful, put a picture up on the screen in a moment, my beautiful 1962 Massey Ferguson 35 little red tractor. And it's got, amazing, you can put new stuff on the back. So we've got this incredible PTO-driven blower, which is, people see with these on parks with these little backpack blowers. This blower, if it was attached to a person, Elon Musk would want to be in that business. It is so powerful.
Have you seen the guy on Instagram that goes up to bus stops and blows the wigs off women with one?
No.
I have to do that. I have to do that. I have to go down the local high street.
He speculatively walks up to women and he always gets it right. The one that's throwing the syrup, and he just blows them into the road.
Well, I wouldn't need to be that discerning because it would blow the whole person off. But I spent the weekend finding new stacks of leaves to blow. And because I'm OCD, we have lots of CCTV on the farm everywhere. So I get to the late afternoon and I look on the cameras on here and I think, there's some leaves falling again. How could they? So I say to Lynn, I'm just going to make sure that one of the garage doors is shut. I'm too embarrassed to tell her what I'm doing. So I'm going to go and check the garage doors are shut. And she can hear because it's quite. I wear earplugs in this thing because it's quite noisy.
She can't call you back.
I actually did it last night when it was dark, and I forgot to bring my earplug. Bloody hell, it's noisy. But so it's just such fun. It's so OC seeing this leaf-free area, and then knowing that I could get a little alert if there's little leaves falling on here. A little buzzer could say, "Get your little red tractor out." So I spent a lot of time on the road and a lot of happy time blowing leaves.
Blowing leaves.
Dear listeners, make sure Cooper takes his pill before the next podcast. Neil Clifford, what have you been doing in cars this week? How long have we got?
Oh, okay. I'll give you one little story.
Go on.
I bought something.
No.
Manish needs to come to the course of buying cars by Neil Clifford at Cambridge because I'm so good at it. It's actually a Cambridge course, 3 years. I think, what did I do? I landed from Mexico. I was incredibly badly jet lagged. I felt like shit. And then suddenly you're having a cup of tea at home with your wife and a digestive. And on Instagram, you see this car. And it's at KGF Cars in Cambridge. And it's a camper van.
Yeah.
And suddenly, a minute before, I had no requirement for a Volkswagen 1976 camper van. A minute later, it's the only thing I could think about.
Yeah.
My life would not be fulfilled in any way unless I owned this Volkswagen camper van because it's got 9 seats, it's green with tan, it's got a 110 horsepower tuned flat 2-litre engine. It's got fakey, probably little Porsche Fouche wheels, completely restored, 16,995. And for the next 3 hours, I could not think about anything else. Oh, it's going to be so wonderful. It's going to be the car that takes the family to the pub. I had so many reasons how this car is going to change my life. And there I am messaging on Instagram, and 10 minutes, the guy hadn't responded. So then I have to go and find their website and send them an email. And then there's a phone number on his website. You know, you get the home phone number and the mobile number. So I'm then texting the guy to his mobile number on a Sunday. This guy must think I'm absolute fucking lunatic. This guy's contacted me 4 different communication manners.
You're a real addict, Neil. You're the lead addict.
You are.
Anyway, I bought it for asking price. It's being delivered on Friday.
And he's thinking I didn't ask enough for it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
He didn't.
probably.
He didn't.
Yeah, what he would have been thinking is, I got a fish on. I got a fish on.
Fish on.
I'm selling this car today.
It's what is known as entrepreneurialship because it's at least £1,000 cheaper than it should be, and we're gonna do podcasts in it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
We've got
van.
that's a bay window, isn't it? Type 2. Yeah. We've got Keith on the farm here has got a split screen. We could park them nose to nose like that.
Not sure Johnny's going to approve the acoustic, lads.
We're going to do mobile podcasts from Dick Lovett Ferrari in the car park.
Sell merch.
Do you remember the British
Matthew bring us out a coffee?
Concords did that. You remember that? The British Airways and Air France Concords did that. They just touched noses of that first flight. One of those beautiful images ever.
Nose off.
We will reproduce that with 2 combi vans.
Moving on. This is an observation that came because I was looking at some used cars last week, as you do most of the time. How cheap do electric cars have to get before even Luddites like us think, I might like to buy one of those? Because we're all looking for value. Let's face it, above all else, everyone wants to be nicking something for a song. And for me, there is no real value in the marketplace just yet. It's coming. The market is softening. But if you want real value, the kind of value that you boast about to your mate down the pub, it's electric cars. They just seem so cheap. Like Taycans and the Taycan Sport Turismo thing, the Audi the R8, sorry, not the R8, the e-tron GT thing. They're massive value. Yeah. I know they don't necessarily complete journeys, and they've got the range of a car with a 10-litre fuel tank. But at what point do we all go, I better have one of those? They're so cheap. Neil Clifford.
Yes. This is suddenly turning into the BMW Fan Club podcast, isn't it? I'm obsessed with buying the leggiest i3 BMW with the range extender. And if I'm watching them every night. And once they dip, they're sort of 10-ish. If you get to 70,000 miles, you go and search on the forum to see whether the batteries all go crap or whatever. I want the leggiest i3 in the United Kingdom for £9,000 with the range extender. and I'm going to scoot around in it for about 5 minutes and then get bored, and then it will be my son's first car when he passes his test in March.
Is that what you want him to have as first car?
Yeah, I think it's a cool first car.
It's a very clever electric car.
Because otherwise he's going to bloody break down every 5 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's a great first car.
Yeah. It's a better first car than the Citroen Ami electric car.
Yeah, that's not a good first car.
That is.
I've got one of those i3s, Neil. So it's not very leggy, but I might let you have it.
Yeah.
9995.
Mine's not. Mine's one owner from new. It's actually not. It's
CarPlay. It's the S model.
I can totally imagine what yours is like.
But there's so much value out there.
Really?
You know, I've heard of someone trading, you know, not that old, a Taycan, the estate one, the sexy one, done a few miles, but not too bad. You know, this is a £130,000 car. It's trading at 55, 60 grand.
I mean, the bottom. I was talking to somebody in the leasing trade about this yesterday, and when the UK government made the announcement to say it's not 2030, it's 2035, without anybody reading the small print, because there is sort of there's a graph, one of our graphs, we'd be sort of averagely pleased with this, that shows the number of EVs that have to be sold each year. So it's not like you get to 2030 and there's none. It's staged. So for 2035, in actual fact, it's not a big difference. But all everybody heard was, I've got 5 more years.
Exactly.
EVs,
Brilliant.
stuff that.
Yeah.
So lots of dealers had lots of stock, Porsche, BMW in particular, so you can see it. But there's incredible value in new EVs.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen this BYD? This
Build Your Dream.
Build Your Dream. I saw them when we were in Holland, in Netherlands earlier on in the year. The Dolphin. Sounds like something Jacques Cousteau would have cooed over. Remember Jacques Cousteau said, he is swimming in the ocean with my friends, the dolphins.
Oh, he was lovely, wasn't he?
Yeah, I missed that. So the BYD Dolphin, it's Britain's cheapest electric car, £26,000. MG, Morris Garages, as we used to know it, Britain's fastest growing volume brand, an EV brand.
Yeah.
The MG4 EV, 29 grand. So in new cars, there's a lot of value. But in the used one, I have to say, if I, like Neil, I had an i3 about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, not the range extender and not the S. The S, the sporty one, doesn't work. It's just ridiculous. It just feels, it's not a great motorway car. I just feel if you did a big lane change, the top half of the car is going to carry on going one way while the bottom half of the car departs stage left. And the S is just even, so it's probably got a very, very intrusive stability control to stop sort of this topographic separation of the vehicle. But I think the i3 is still a really, really, it was just because it wasn't like a BMW, it wasn't any other BMW with an EV in it. It was a different car, the fabrics inside, the look, the feel. It was just literally 10, 12 years too early. So I'm going to use this call to arms, Mr. Harris, to look at i3s today, because I think they are very, very sensible.
Manish, you tempted?
I mean, what I love about these challenges are it does get me reading. And, I saw exactly that. A Taycan 4S with just 19,000 miles, £58,000. So less than the 520i Touring New again. And I'll tell you the thing that caught my eye was actually the Volkswagen ID3. I don't know how you guys feel about them. I've seen a few of them. I know they're a bit boxy.
Yeah, early ones are a bit weak.
I think, Neil, did you not have one of those for about 30 seconds?
It's shit.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're kidding.
Yeah, no, don't get an early.
Patrick,
Yeah. Auto cars lead journalist. It's shit.
It's shit. No, so underneath that, though, I thought the Kia e-Niro 3.
The Kia e-Niro, if you want, what would be a 2021 Kia e-Niro?
I've just got something here. 2020.
Yeah.
With 49,000 miles,
yeah,
for £17,000.
That's a lot of. That's if you wanted an EV, that's a lot of value in an EV. Those Kia Niros are actually quite good. Miles better than the original ID3.
Okay,
I think this disparity between these cars that you guys are talking about, these new, cheap, sort of white good type cars, is what's making it so challenging for these luxury cars to be doing.
How much does anyone know how much a Kia Niro the e-Niro 3, what does that cost new?
I'm guessing it's 40 grand or something like that.
But this thing is less than half the price with just 40,000 miles on it. It's 3 years old.
But they also none of these manufacturers want you to buy them for cash. It's all about deposit and a monthly payment. So when Porsche priced a Taycan at 150 grand, they're not thinking people are going to go and write a check for 150 grand. It's 20 grand down and 1,500 quid a month. So if you are the guy that goes in and writes a check for a Taycan for 150 grand, you're going to take some pain, especially if you don't like it after 6 months.
It's funny you say that, Edward, because again, I looked at some dealers for this 520, and I couldn't believe it was cheaper to buy it on finance than it was to write them a check. It's £3,000 cheaper to take BMW finance.
That's how they sell cars. I think 78% of cars in the UK are bought on finance.
They're banks now, aren't they? They're banks. Here's one though. With my full-on, ironically, petrol head hat on, if my Audi e-tron GT, which I think is the best looking EV, I just think they're great looking cars on the road. That's the Audi Taycan. If I failed to get to London and back to go and see Edward for an important meeting, I'd feel so much more relaxed about being on the hard shoulder stranded if I knew I'd nicked it for so little money. It's just value, when perceived mass value will offset any shittery in a car. Because going, I've won. Doesn't matter, I've won. I can tell everyone. And if my family get angry with me, I'll say, well, I nicked it. It was cheap.
And bonus, I didn't have to see Edward.
No, he's on his way home. He got to me.
I've already seen Edward.
Okay. Oh, well, when somebody...
I'm intrigued to see how these electric hypercars perform, like the Rimac and the Lotus Evija, and from a financial standpoint, because still, one thing that holds, I think, McLaren P1's back. I think a LaFerrari today is best part of 3 million quid, and so all of a sudden the 150 grand to replace the battery feels somewhat palatable if you're in that margin. But the P1 is sort of still lagging around 1.1 million pounds, something like that, because everyone's nervous of the costs of these hybrid type batteries. And I can't imagine these first sort of electric hypercars are not going to have similar issues when it comes to it, especially if they're being used in extreme ways.
Who's going to buy them? I just don't understand that marketplace and who's, anyway. Californian billionaires.
How many of those are there? And the thing is, why will they ever sell them? They'll just leave them in their garages, won't they?
No, they'll. I think that there's certainly some cities and countries, states that you're going to struggle to be. It won't be politically correct to be driving a ICE supercar around when the government.
I want to see how the revenue.
But they're just going to leave them in their garages, aren't they? They're going to try to sell them.
How's the revenue going to respond when someone says, right, I'm going to put a Rimac Nevera and claim my 100% relief against corporation tax? And their company that year turned over 800 grand, and then they claim pretty much the same sum when they buy their Rimac Nevera. It's going to happen, isn't it?
That's quite a good idea, Chris. Good,
it is actually.
You go and look at your i3s. I'm off to look at Rimacs and writing down off tax.
Let's set up a little off-the-shelf company. Rimacs are us.
Yes.
See what happens. How far we get.
Okay. Moving on to the two-car garage. So this ebbed and flowed. It was going on from the comments, and then Edward proposed this. I'm going to read it out to you verbatim. Right. I'm going to make a call. That means Harris is unresponsive on the group. Ask your wife, no budget. It will be fun discussing. I think he might regret the word fun. Just say to them, what two cars would you like to own? No budget, and I need an answer in 60 seconds. I know what my better halves would be. I don't even need to ask her because I know exactly what she likes. So, Edward, you go first.
Well, I've opened up a can of worms here. This wasn't a 60-second conversation. So, as I said, we're in New York last week, and they've got the 250 GTO that's going to be sold at auction in the next couple of weeks in the front window of the Ferrari showroom on Park Avenue.
Yeah.
And so stupidly, I put my 3 children in front of the window and took a photo and said, "That's going to be sold for $75 million." So that she wanted the 250 GTO, but she calmed down. She eventually calmed down and said, "What about that 275 GTB you bought from that guy called Nick?" So she's chosen an Azzurro Metallizzato 275 GTB 4 cam.
The ugly one.
No, not the ugly
One
one.
with cross eyes.
And this is going to be very controversial now. Her other car is like, oh, that 4x4 Rolls Royce.
Oh,
That's what she went for.
Mm.
And anyway, then the conversation went really downhill and said, "You're probably going to buy these cars for yourself anyway." They're never going to be mine. That's what she said.
we've just used the Cullinan word in a context I didn't think we ever would. Chris Cooper, cleanse us.
So this was actually quite good fun. So the boys and I were at supper yesterday evening, and we went, and it said, "Look, there's one here. Lynn's got to answer." I said, "What do you mean? Need her help with it?" "No, she's got to answer it." So we dragged her in and said, "Right, you have 60 seconds." And I read out this thing, and she said, "Does it mean I can't have a Land Rover?" I said, "It's got to be a Land Rover." So assume there's a Land Rover somewhere. So in Cooper style, there's a sort of somewhere else. But she really just straight out said, "Do you know what I'd really, really like? I don't care how much they cost. I'd really love a Jag XK150 OTS, not the Roadster, the open top Sportster. So it's got just the 2 seats, dark blue or grey.
nice.
And that 911 that Saga used to drive in the bridge.
Oh yes, so
Grey
a G
911S.
Yeah.
I was so proud. I was so proud. The boys and I just went, "Yes, there's a 911 in there that your mother has said that would be a really lovely thing to have," because you love that series. And when they did that tunnel version of it, they gave her a 944 automatic.
Yeah,
which
they
I
did.
thought was a rather Eurotunnel disappointment.
Yeah.
Top of other Eurotunnel disappointments. So an XK150 OTS and Saga's 911S from the bridge.
Nice.
I thought, that's my girl.
Yeah, we had the little chat last night, and Emma, who's my wife, said, "Oh, I did really adore that Escalade thing we had in New York. That would be wonderful. I'd love one of those. It's so much better and bigger. You know, we've got 3 6-foot kids and a Ridgeback. So the space, the 7-seat thing with all the leg room, you've got all the gear, drives lovely." So Cadillac Escalade. Actually, there is one coming soon on Collecting Cars. Have you looked
Is there?
Yeah.
coming soon column? Yeah, I saw that last night when I couldn't sleep.
I'm going to
Brave
start
boy,
making
brave boy on a
videos.
British B-road in one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And then she said, "Oh, I don't really know what else. Actually, I just love the car I've got. Can I just keep that?" Which is a Mark 8 Golf R.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With
good
it's
choice.
got every option. It's got the Akrapovic thing. It's got all the bloody special lights and all that shit, leather, which I'd have preferred cloth, to be honest. But it's it's really cool. And she's like, "Actually, this is just the perfect car. I can't think of anything better than a Golf."
A wee bit. Actually, no. You've shit canned the ID3, so actually a bit of VW love were allowed because we've given the yin to the yang. Manish, what would Mrs. Manish like to have in her 2-car garage?
Natasha Wharton, she keeps her surname.
Yep.
Sat at the sofa. I said, "Look, we've got this 2-car garage challenge tomorrow for your podcast." "Yes." "What time?" 8 in the morning. "Haven't you got to go to work?" "I will afterwards." "So can you give me 2 cars that you'd like?" "No, I don't like cars."
Oh,
Just one car that you like. Don't make it up. make it clear I don't do cars. So I said, what about that beautiful asset? There was a beautiful Volante at the top of Fitzjohn's Avenue, convertible, navy blue. I often saw you look at that and go, that's quite a nice car. No, I didn't. So you're saying I made up the fact that you used to see this car when we used to get to the top of Fitzjohn's Avenue and say you like it. I don't remember it. So do you remember that R. White's commercial, the secret lemonade drinker?
Yes. Cool.
That's me. That's me, right? That's me in the middle of the night. Gonna give it one of those nights. Ferrari 456M, Ferrari 456M, darling. No.
I think we should come round to your house for tea one weekend and show Mrs. Manish how lovely cars can be and how wondrous her life would be with people like us in it. Because if you
I'm not sure we're great ambassadors for making this any more.
I think she'd love us. I think she'd love us.
I think she probably would. She just needs to accept that this is a part of my life, okay, that you guys are encouraging weekly. And I feel like a dam that's about to burst. I'm going to do a Neil. I'm going to basically sell everything we own just to have a few cars. And I'm going to live in a little wooden shed next to them.
You genuinely need to.
You've got no better tutor than Neil Clifford, because he can help you do ruinous things if he needs to.
Yeah.
And Neil, look at this headrest on the Escalade coming soon.
I've looked.
Ooh.
Oh no, I saw it.
Got speakers in it.
Yeah.
Have you seen the one that's got a gun case in it in America?
Yeah. Gun rack.
You pull a flap down on the side, you put a code in, and you can get your gun out.
When we do car configurators, we are going to do car configurators, we should do the US website for F-150 and see how many gun racks you can tick the box for the bird dog seat. You know what the bird dog seat is?
Yes.
The middle seat on the front row where the dog you use when you're going shooting birds. The bird dog seat. Gun racks.
I had a Corvette press car in America about 10 years ago. And the bloke that showed me around it said, this is where you put your gun. And there was just in front of the gear lever, there was a cubby for your gun. And I said, I don't have a gun. And he said, well, you won't need the cubby then.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah. So I've spoken to my better half, actually very briefly about this, whilst I was whinging about my toothache at about God knows what time this morning. And it's quite simple. It's not even a 2-car garage. It's a 1-car garage. She just loves our old Land Cruiser. It's all she ever wants to drive. It's a bit of a nightmare because it's not ULEZ compatible in Bristol. So you end up having to drive 14 miles to go around the ULEZ zone, as you do in these mad places. But it's done 150,000 miles, just come back from refurb, and we just love it. It's just the best car. Didn't want to drive anything else. You say, do you want to drive a fancy 911? No, I'll just take the Land Cruiser. Thank you. It's the best car ever. I love it. Done.
Yeah.
How much does ULEZ charge you in Bristol to go into the middle in something like that?
I think it's £9. So we just avoid it. We go
so
around.
We pay £12.50 the moment I start my car. And if you go into central London, you pay another 15. So it's £27.50 to go.
You need to make sure you drive where the cameras aren't, because I'm sure my 911's not ULEZ, and I haven't paid a fine yet.
Wow.
Well, somebody might have done it on your behalf, Edward.
Okay, here's a ULEZ question. Those number plates with the raised letters, does that work?
Yes.
Are we sure about that?
Well, my lovely taxi driver man tells me they do work.
Okay.
Because I'm like, mate, I don't mind getting in your black BMW. I wish it was navy blue, not black. But can you change those number plates? They're disgusting. It's like super chavvy. And he's like, it saves me 200 quid a week.
Wow.
So how many fines are they missing out on by people with these number plates?
I don't bloody know.
We can't clearly condone
Exactly.
good listeners of our podcast avoiding the excise duties of local authority, even whatever we're calling Sadiq Khan these days. The Land Cruiser thing, I have to say, there's one of our listeners, Mr. H, Grant, you know who you are, Grant, who will be, when he listens to this with his mates, will be saying, I told you so, when you describe your love for the Land Cruiser. Those that know.
Well, I love that thing. Right. I think that's just nicely crawled to an end. Thank you very much for joining us.
Lujon, Henry Mancini.
Goujon?
Lujon.
Lujon, Henry
Lujon,
Mancini.
Henry Mancini.
That's
Just
the
as a-
Mancini that did the Pink Panther theme tune, is it?
Exactly. It's
Did he play for
basically
QPR?
Peter Sellers in a velvet
Well, that's
jacket.
Terry Mancini.
Oh, there
sorry.
we go.
And a
We only need
beautiful
one
car.
piece of music this week, and Manish has done it. We'll add it to the Spotify playlist. Thank you very much for joining us. Sorry some of us sound half dead. That's because we are. Chris Cooper, Manish Pandey, Neil Clifford, Edward Lovett, and myself. I'm going to go and take some more codeine. See you next week.